This excerpt covers the topic of working space from the NFPA 70E electrical safety training class presented by Howard Herndon. Howard has over 40 years of experience in the electrical field, covering field experience, equipment services, power studies, and engineering. Howard's class lays out the safety requirements for electrical workers in a practical manner that is applicable to the veteran electrical worker as well as the new electrical trainee. The training class can also be adapted to fit your facility or team needs. If you would like more information or would like to schedule electrical safety training for your team or facility, please contact us at 725-214-6004.
You guys are going to fight this big time. What is working space for? That's for the safety of us that are working around that equipment, isn't it? That's for the safety of you, so you can operate the equipment, you can get freely in and out of the area. And you're going to fight this deal about the hot dog vendor wants to store his extra buns in the electric room, or napkins, or the janitors are going to want to push their carts in because there's lots of room in your spaces. But that room's there necessary for us as electrical workers in and out of the rooms. I would encourage you to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's great that you have a brand new building and you can set that precedence right now. As opposed, many of you have worked in the hospitals and casinos, and you know that's a constant fight, isn't it? So, what is all that workspace about? There's guidelines in the National Electric Code on workspace. These are some of the key items. A lot of it's covered in 110.32 and 34. You can look it up. You got, based on the width of the equipment, the depth of the equipment, you got dedicated space above the equipment and at the sides you have 30 inches rolling on the sides. So you have a lot of space requirements within the National Electric Code. What happened here? Well, the mechanical guy decided that his compressor was more important, and can you guys see it? Yeah, okay. So we have the switchboard here. From my angle, it looks really fuzzy, so that's why I had to turn around. So we have a switchboard here, we have a compressor, we have a dryer, then we have a panel on the other side. You can just barely see the handle of it. Should the compressor be there? The answer is no. But somebody came along and said, well, I got some space here, we'll just put it here. Happens many, many times. This is an actual picture. What about this? Now, it's kind of sitting on top of the pad, yeah. If it wasn't intentionally sitting there, it is now sitting there because, you know, sheet metal sags. We don't really want to do this. We have, as electrical workers, we have 6 foot above the equipment is our dedicated space. Why? Because oftentimes we have to run extra pipes out, we have to pull covers off the top, we have to do all kinds of work in the future that may not be intentional there. Oftentimes in facilities we have to, because of mismatches in electrical and mechanical plumbing, we have to do some of this type of stuff. And sometimes it's necessary and sometimes we can get approvals for it. But let's make sure that when we do it, that we complete the system correctly. Look at where the drip line goes. It was never connected. So if the sewer leaks, where's it going to leak on? Right on another piece of equipment. It'll miss the big switchboard, but it'll get the small one. So, you know, watch out for these type of things. And you might see some of these things as you get into a new building, because maybe the mechanical guy was going to come back on Monday and do that, and what does he do when he leaves on Friday? Turns his brain off, and he comes back on Monday, he turns it back on and totally forgot about it. Stuff happens. It may not have been picked up by the inspector. Does it make a difference if I'm impeding upon my equipment space if I have emergency equipment? It doesn't matter. Workspace is workspace. I still have to have it. I can paint it red and tell you it's an emergency piece of equipment and it still has to have the same clearances. This has several violations. One is I can't get into the panel to work on it till I crawl over the transformer, which is not cool. And the second thing is I can't operate the equipment next to it properly. It's in it within its workspace. Sometimes we as electricians do it to ourselves. The signs are on the equipment, and we decide that we don't want to take all those boxes of lamps back to the shop because we got to take them back to the shop, and then when they get in the shop, the boss is going to yell at us to make sure we get them in the disposal area so that we can get the people to come pick them up and all the stuff that we have to do to fluorescent lamps nowadays. If you've ever worked, and some of you have worked around hotel casinos, this is a massive problem with hotel casinos. Stuff that's stored that's not supposed to be there. I don't think a freezer or an ice maker or a sheetrock cart need to be in the electric room. About 4 one morning, I went to this facility, which was when they were doing the transition from the Imperial Palace to whatever it's called today. Link. There you go. Thank you. Was working with an electrical contractor, and he said, I want you to be here. We're going to do some switching. I need to switch a 3,000 amp breaker off that hadn't been turned off in many, many years. I want you to be here just in case we need you. And then somehow I got elected to turn it off. And I said, I'm not touching that, and this is a breaker from the 70s. I'm not touching that unless I got a clear path outside of this room. So we had to take all this equipment and move it. What I could get out of the room, we got out. We moved it all back so I had a clear path out of the room. Because I don't want to be tripping over shit, falling my feet into a pallet when I'm trying to escape from an area. And that's why we have those clear spaces. What do you think of this one? Is this workable? So we've got a cooling tower here. We got a walking grate. We got a safety switch, and somebody even put toe guards around them. What are some of the problems here, you think? They even put in a little notch so you can turn the handle off. What's one of our rules of locking out things? You got to lock out, tag out, but what is the procedure I have to follow? You shut the device off, and then I have to verify it some way. Either I lock it out, then verify it, or I verify it, then lock it out. But the best way to make sure something is disconnected is to visually look at it and verify it, right? Can I do any kind of verification on that safety switch? Not unless I'm going to move that whole walkway. Make sense? I can't even get the door open. What's the first thing we know about a handle on a device, whether it's a safety switch or a breaker, when I move it from the on position to the off position? What's the only thing I know? What?
My handle works.
The handle works. You're exactly right. You're like, well, that's kind of weird, Howard. No, it's not. You can ask either one of these guys and myself. We have seen many, many new breakers, new, out of the box, as well as old breakers and old devices that have been sitting out in the sun. When you turn them to the off position, that does not mean that all three of the blades or the contacts actually separated. Exactly right. The same thing with the contact points in a circuit breaker. They could be fused together. I never want to trust just turning a breaker off. I always want to take my meter out and verify.
There's this piece of shit disconnect for residential AC units that's got a light switch where you slide it from on to off. Every time you slide it to off, the plastic parts break inside of it. So one leg will be dead, the other one won't be. I've tried that a couple of times.
I have, my guess is, based on my experience, that about 1/2 of 1% all breakers that come from the factory, a 3-pole breaker, one of the legs is not going to operate properly. Now you look at, well, that's only 1/2 of 1%, but when you look at all the breakers that are sold, and that's just based on the ones that I've seen tested. You've seen the same thing. Because I've had the guys, when I owned a testing company, come into the office and say, Howard, we got a problem. I'm like, what's the problem? Well, the testing machine doesn't shut off. This machine doesn't shut off until the contact's clear. If the contact's clear, that means it's still running power through it. And it would be a brand new breaker from, none of the manufacturers are exempt. The Siemens isn't exempt, Eaton isn't exempt, Squirt E isn't exempt, and neither is GE. So I think probably the worst ones are Siemens and GE, wouldn't you say? Yeah. But the way it is, they're not required to test every breaker that goes out the door. They do batch testing. On the larger breakers, they test each one, but on the smaller breakers, they do batch testing. So it's real important. We talked about egress from the room. What are some of the important things? You're in a brand new building that shouldn't have this problem, but if you're in an older facility, what are some of the important things that I want to understand about getting out of the room? Clear path, locks. I want to make sure that I can get out of the room. There's nothing worse to walk into the electric room and hear the door shut behind you. If you've ever worked in some of the older facilities, such as Flamingo, Link is another one. The facilities that were built in the 60s and 70s, the doors open in. What's the problem with the doors opening in? If I have burnt my hands, how am I going to turn that? If I've probably burnt my hands, I probably have a pretty good chance that I have done something to my eyes and face too. There is a ocean recording on a factory plant that had one of these large mechanical electrical rooms that we often see in facilities. You know, electrical's on this side, mechanical's on this side. We tend not to build facilities that way now for fire and maintenance purposes, but Joe the electrician, they asked him to go check a motor out to figure out why this motor wasn't running. Joe went in and checked the motor out, happened to use the wrong testing instrument, or the testing instrument went bad, or there was a problem. He roamed in that room for several hours before somebody said, well, where's he at? And they went in the room and found his blood trail all over the room, and he was slumped over in the corner dead. Basically had an implosion on a piece of equipment and couldn't find his way out of the room. So we want to make sure that we've got the right safety equipment on and we have clear egress from those areas. So if I go into a room and the door doesn't open out, what am I going to do with that door? Prop it open. Whether I take a screwdriver or I carry a wedge block or a door stop or cart, or my 5-gallon bucket I got my tools in, I want to make sure that that door is blocked open. If there's a problem with people walking in that area, I'm going to take and put danger tape up around the door. Stay out of here. I don't want you in here, but I want it open so I can get out.